Well, welcome everyone to National Distance Learning Week. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We are thrilled to be hosting presentations all week long, and we hope that you've been able to attend some and can continue to do so and join us. So I'm going to turn this over to my colleague Lynn Ann at SUNY Online to introduce our speaker.
Good afternoon and welcome. I'm pleased to introduce our presenter today. Marguerite Goulet is an associate professor at SUNY Delhi with 11 years of experience in teaching in their online RN to BSN program. She has over 44 years experience as a nurse in oncology, cancer genetics, and women's health. Her specialties are epidemiology and healthcare policy with a focus on public health. Marguerite works with individuals who are homeless, have substance abuse disorders, and are victims of human trafficking. She's been married to her husband, Henri, for 43 years and has 2 children and 5 grandchildren. Please welcome Marguerite.
Well, welcome to all of you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to get my presentation going. And let me close my chat. And Aaron just texted me in the chat, or just to indicate that I am from Columbus, Ohio. And let's see, what else did she write in the chat? And I teach at SUNY Delhi in their online BSN program. And I also am chair of the curriculum committee and do a lot of other things working with campus activities and love what I do. So I'm really, really thrilled to be able to share this with you. And let me minimize this. Okay, can everybody see my slides?
Yes, it looks great.
Okay, so thank you for taking the time out from your busy schedules to attend this presentation on a topic which is so important for teaching online. And the reason why I wanted to offer this is that I had attended other broader presentations in 2019 and 2020, which included this topic, and it really resonated with me. And I wanted to provide an opportunity for us to explore ways to improve upon what we may already be doing. Since so many of our classes are online now, I thought it would provide a vehicle for sharing so that we can learn from each other. And I always start my presentations with a disclaimer. And this presentation is an overview about ways to create social and emotional presence. Some topics merit a standalone presentation. We care about our students and we want them to be successful. And there are a lot of ways to improve the learning experiences that are not daunting. This does not need to be a time-consuming effort, but there are little things we can do to bring ourselves and our humanity and authenticity into our online classes to increase the learning experience for students and also to improve our own satisfaction with our online teaching. So here are the presentation learning outcomes. Describe the importance of creating presence and discuss strategies for creating presence in online classes. So the intent is to think more comprehensively about teaching online and connecting with our students. This is crucial more than ever before when we think about all our students and faculty are contending with during this 8-month-long pandemic, which we all know has heightened the need for physical distancing, but increased the need for social engagement and caring more than ever before. So I'm not going to spend much time on the following two slides, which talk about the state of online education, but know that all these bullets are a given. The major point is that there has been an exponential growth in online learning due to COVID-19, and that will continue to be the case during this pandemic and in the future. So this diagram is a modification of the Community of Inquiry theoretical framework that was developed by Garrison et al. In a seminal article. And it's based upon their research that shows us different components of effective teaching and learning. Now, I would add that these are all good principles of teaching, whether teaching in person or online. And as you can see, the modified framework depicts three different presences of effective teaching and learning that result in deep learning depicted in the center. The first is the cognitive presence, which is the intellectual work that goes into creating and teaching effective classes with a lot of expertise and sound reasoning that you use for your courses. The second is teaching presence, which is the guidance we provide to our students, the explanations, the advising, the feedback, the clarifications of misunderstandings, etc. The third is the social presence, which is a crucial component that is often overlooked in online classes. And we know that humans are social creatures and that we learn better in community with other people. We learn from and with others. This social element is an interactive piece that may often be missing in online classes. The emotional presence is wrapped around the framework, and that's been shaped by the impactful book, The Spark of Learning, Energizing the College Classroom with the Science of Emotion by Sarah Rose Kavanaugh. Academic content often deliberately de-emphasizes the impact of emotional activity or even acknowledgement that we have emotions. And I'm not going to go into that in greater detail anymore on this slide, other than to say that online students often feel anxious and uncertain about their experiences in their online classes. And that anxiety impacts their ability to engage and learn. So we want to recognize that emotions infuse everything, so that we can deliberately impact our students' ability to engage and learn and stay motivated when we attend to their needs as emotional beings and help them feel more optimistic, more welcome by bridging the distance in online classes. I teach sometimes the online orientation class for the RN to BSN program. And most of the students, when they first start out, have a very high anxiety level because this is their first online class, it may be, or they're just wondering, am I going to be able to do this? So a lot of what we do early on, especially, is to try to allay anxiety. And we know that even certain classes, students are afraid of the class. I teach epidemiology. The title alone is frightening for students. Or I teach healthcare policy also. And that's a course many students wait till the last minute to take because they dread taking it. And we all know that other courses like statistics or research or chemistry or physics themselves can create a lot of anxiety. So early on, being aware of that and trying to help with that is very important. So why is it important to create social and emotional presence? There's an assumption that learning is a dry, composed activity, best conducted in quiet tones and ruled by an unemotional consideration of the facts. And historically, some have even constructed classrooms and courses with that in mind. The argument is that if we truly want to motivate and educate our students, we are better off targeting their emotions. There is evidence from a study of education, psychology, and cognitive and neuroscience that emotion is woven into the experience of learning. Emotion and cognition are not separate or at odds with each other. Neuroscience research indicates that the brain systems involved in emotion and cognition are not separate systems pulling in opposite directions. There are overlapping circuits are responsible for both, and biochemical bases for each are actually very similar. So neural mechanisms underlying emotion, motivation, and learning are so intertwined. And think about it, nearly every decision in your life, nearly every moment in your life presents you with a decision. Decision-making is fueled by and guided by emotion. Emotion is guiding our students in every stage of learning, from selecting courses to deciding what discussion or assignment topics to select in a choice poll. More student interest and curiosity leads to greater engagement with the content, and engagement with the content leads to a better learning experience. So as teachers, our goal is to maximize student learning and energize students to strive for more learning. We know that a subset of our students are intrinsically motivated and would succeed no matter what. But many students have a host of other concerns besides intellectual growth. And boy, is this more so with the pandemic. Students have personal struggles with mental health issues, caring for family at home, educating their children. Some of them are now homeschooling, working, trying to navigate their social worlds. Writer and self-improvement guru Dale Carnegie once argued, when dealing with people, remember you are not dealing with creatures of logic, but creatures of emotion. Emotions grab attention, hijack working memory, enhance our long-term memory, and engender motivation. Emotions determine many of our motivations, decisions, and behaviors, and the circuits governing learning and emotions overlap. Emotions are at the heart of what it means to be a scholar, a learner, and a student. So the rest of the presentation will focus on what we can do as instructors to create social and emotional presence. And the first thing is show up in class. So technically, online classes do not require you to be actively present. When you think about it, when you're teaching in person, when you walk in the room, your students are supposed to begin learning. That's not the case with online classes. You're not physically present in the online environment, and real-time interactions and guidance is missing since many of our classes are not synchronous classes. But it is still possible to be present and engaged with students. The impression we make on our first day of opening our online classes matters. We can convey optimism, confidence, and enthusiasm. You know, the nature of the content and activities you plan are important, but so is the style in which you present the content and activities. My opening email that I sent out to students the day I open classes, which is actually 5 days before they start, is where I begin being positive. My email has changed in the last few sessions with the pandemic. And I explain right up front that I'm very flexible with deadlines and to let me know as soon as possible if you need more time. I also mention things like review the course announcements, and I'll highlight any changes, such as any recent changes with the course management system, etc. I open the class with a course announcement welcoming students. That's very positive, informative, and confident. I provide the students with a calendar of assignments to help them get organized. And regular course announcements provide an opportunity for positive feedback, encouragement, to introduce topics, to summarize key points, remind students of deadlines, and in those announcements, you may answer questions that have come up via email where multiple students may have been, asking you, and you can address that in course announcements. I also start with a video that allows me to share about myself so that my students can know who I am as a person. Helps them to know me better, where do I live, about myself, my family, my pets, former and current work experiences. Sharing about yourself communicates to your students that class is a safe place for sharing and that you are interested in being known and in turn knowing them. Goodbar in 2014 said, when you talk about yourself to your students, you signal to them that you trust them and see them as worthy of confidence. That in turn encourages students to feel more at ease, to open up themselves and commit more fully to the class. When I start my About Us forum with a video, students can post about themselves in the About Us forum. And I respond to every single student's post, and that validates that they're important. And another opportunity to continue to be positive and upbeat and connect with students personally and professionally. Whenever possible, I allow students to select topics within a course that are relevant to them and that their work which sparks interest, or topics that they want to learn more about sparks curiosity. I personally respond to each student's or group's discussion post. Typically, when I start, I'll say hi or hello to students. That eases the tension. And I've also noticed that students are doing that to each other when they're responding to each other. I always thank the first person who starts off the discussion, that very first discussion, because that takes a certain amount of, I would say, courage to start off the discussion when you have nothing to go by. You don't know anything about how this professor grades or anything. So in my replies back to students who have posted in the discussion forum, I provide positive feedback. I try to be confident and optimistic. You know, this quote from Twitter about confidence resonated with me. The secret to successful teaching is pretending that you always knew something that you just learned this morning. So my responses to students' discussion posts expands upon the topic modeling scholarship, use of scholarly resources, length and depth of reply posts that I'm requiring of students, and it also provides an opportunity for me to demonstrate some emotion and passion about topics. It also allows you to ask thought-provoking questions which prompt critical thinking and reasoning. When students respond to my questions, I always thank them for their replies. And I typically try to reply back to them and maybe add something more. And I love the dialogue with students as it validates that what they posted is important. And that's one of the best parts of my job, is interacting with students that way. Providing feedback quickly to students so that they can incorporate it into the next week's work is also very important. Provide positive and constructive feedback with examples. I always look for opportunities for praise or validation for students' contributions, and paying particular attention to providing some positive feedback even to students who may be struggling. Now we have a system that we use called Starfish, which allows us to send kudos to students or for students who are struggling flags. And I have just seen that students really appreciate those kudos more than ever before. And I typically send out at least a couple to students every 7-week session. I've also learned to be very careful, and I very meticulously choose my words when I'm issuing a flag for a struggling student. Something else too is I choose to keep my email open all day, and students appreciate that. In one of my courses, since I teach epidemiology, there's so many emerging topics in that, and I created a forum for me to contribute new information and emerging topics, but also for students, another way to connect. Basically use every opportunity to communicate with students within the course. If you have, or you're using technology in your course where you can verbally communicate, like we use VoiceThread, you're also communicating with students when you're responding to their voice threads. They use email, text, phone, Zoom, etc. Another thing is be yourself. How do we reclaim the teacher persona in online classes with minimal or no audio or facial expressions? Many of the other strategies we'll be discussing convey caring. In my course announcements and emails and in the Q&A forum, I always thank the student for the question they ask. I encourage them to ask more questions. Never hesitate to ask questions when they say, I hate to bother you. Or, this may be a stupid question. I always tell them there's no such thing as a stupid question. And that I get concerned when students do not ask questions. I also found in my email that students really appreciate I may share something personally with them, such as have a good day, or certainly stay safe and well, or even something about myself. I just came in from a walk and I hope your weather is as nice as mine is. I've often used humor with students, especially when I make a mistake. I just say, just wanted to check to see if you were paying attention. Or I just wanted to demonstrate that your instructor is also human and I make mistakes. And humor really, we know humor really allays anxiety. We had a lot of because I teach in the nursing program, we've had a lot of our students actually contract COVID because they were working as nurses. And I reached out to COVID positive patients, or COVID positive students. And what I found is it's not just to ask them where their assignment is, or it was just to check in with them, to say to them, how are you doing? How are you feeling? You know, last session I had a student in my epidemiology class who struggled from week 1 and didn't even participate in week 2. And I connected with this student. And what I learned is that she had taken a substantial amount of time off from school. This was her first class back. She worked 7 days a week with 3 jobs, and her husband had his hours cut at work. She had 3 children, 2 were on the autism spectrum, and somehow she didn't think I would understand. And what I did was I told her my daughter had 3 children on the autism spectrum, and that I really did understand. And we flexed deadlines like a lot for this student. But I spoke to her several times on the phone, and she really didn't think she could do it. But I could tell from her work, the quality of her work when she did submit it, it was really good. And I just kept encouraging her, you can do this. I know you can do it. And sure enough, she completed the course and actually continued on. Another way to be yourself is to be passionate about topics. There are topics and issues you are passionate about, and when you demonstrate that passion, you give the students permission to be passionate. You know, such as issues like social justice or equity or unrighteousness, etc. Also, if you've had prior experience that a student shares, you can really connect with that student. Last session, I had a student who worked with the opioid addicted population, and we had lots to talk about related to that based on my experience. Offer student meetings. If you're finding the email students are having difficulty understanding, always offer student meetings via Zoom or even phone calls. And if you did offer a student a meeting on Zoom and you walk on your treadmill every day, it's okay to walk on your treadmill when you're meeting with a student or on your exercise bike. They like to know you're a person. And that may lead into a discussion with your student and more of an opportunity to connect with them. If you have an issue which may impact your ability to respond quickly to students, you can choose to tell them about the issue. You don't have to be specific, but that you have a family crisis. Students know that those things happen to the instructor too. Put yourself in their shoes. How does it feel to take an online class? In my introductory video, I make sure students know that I did my MSN online and I know what they're going through. Take a minute and imagine the experience of nursing or other students working full-time during a pandemic or taking 18 to 21 credit hours. They may have families to care for with aging moms and dads, children with unique learning needs. They may be single fathers or mothers. They may work third shift. They may be logging in late after they put the kids to bed where their mental energy is diminished. They're logging in alone. In the in-person classroom, they can ask an immediate question or nudge someone next to them. They may not have anyone to turn to, which is another reason why I leave my email open. Students may be working 4 12-hour shifts, and we know our nurses, it's never just 12 hours in a row, and this is the only time they have to ask a question. I always check my email before I go to bed and right when I wake up. Also, when you're mired in a subject for decades, it can seem like the most complicated topics are simple. But remember, this content may be very new to your students. Also, make sure the course content is appropriate. If it's too rigorous for the level of the course, it's unfair to students. And boy, this has evolved over time in our nursing program. I remember when I first started back in 2009, we would have weeks where we would have more than 2 things due. Well, we stopped that. Provide flexibility for students. We do a lot of that, especially with all the potential issues students may have during this pandemic, but with work, sick children or parents, they may be sick themselves, they may have computer, internet, or connectivity issues. Organize course content intuitively. You demonstrate your support of students by the design of the class. Make sure the content is organized so you can take the guesswork out of your course to reduce the cognitive load in navigating the course. Leave the students' resources for learning itself. We also have a peer review system for our courses where every few years, each course is reviewed by a team on the curriculum committee. Also, if you're making major revisions to your course, have another trusted colleague look at your course because something may make perfect sense in your head, but not to others. If you have kids that have taken online courses, they're great to look at your course to see if it makes sense to them. Add visual appeal with white space, chunking, limiting paragraph lengths, be explicitly clear, and you don't have to be a professional video editor, but you can make your course appealing to students. And that increases positive feelings about the course. And it also demonstrates to students that you care to make the course appealing aesthetically to them. You don't have to be a graphic designer. Use subheadings. Embed meaningful visuals to make it easy on the eyes for students. And this really does help students. Explain your expectations. This is also related to putting yourself in your student's shoes and taking the guesswork out for the student, which reduces their cognitive load. They cannot raise their hands and ask you a question or detect verbal cues. Remind yourselves that students are working through activities and assignments by themselves. When I get student questions, I try to make changes to avoid those questions. Yet I always welcome questions. Also pay attention to course evaluations and make changes about the course if you see a pattern in the course evaluation comments. In person, you don't just hand out a paper and say nothing. Well, it's much more so in an online class. So we need to provide guidance for what we're looking for and explanations via email, rubrics, checklists, assignment directions. Highlight what you're looking for. Scaffold learning activities. When we teach in person, we're demonstrating the work we ask students to do. We're talking about it, we're explaining what we're doing. We ask critical questions to show students how to connect key concepts in their minds, and we demonstrate how to think and work in our disciplines. It's certainly more of a challenge in the online asynchronous environment. So we want to provide opportunities for students to make steady progress from where they are to where we want them to be. Let students know that you're scaffolding learning. That helps them to know that you care for them. In some ways you can scaffold learning is to get students to practice for lower level stakes. And we use that in classes where VoiceThread technology is new. We have them provide an introductory video using VoiceThread before they're graded on a higher stakes assignment using VoiceThread. We also embed how-to videos and website informations about the technology they'll be using right in the course. And some practice with technology itself so they can level up on focusing on what they need to do for the final project. One concept and one assignment builds on another. Provide examples. This is crucial in an online environment. When you're in person, you see students aren't getting it. You stop and explain the concept in a creative way. We find different ways when we're teaching in person to help students understand. Providing examples helps them to understand complex topics and concepts more effectively. Students appreciate the time you take to provide an example. Any way to show them that they are important, and it is important to you that they understand the concept. Students are very appreciative of this and know that you care and provide these examples for them because you truly want them to understand and be successful. Use them in course instructions, answering questions in the Q&A forum, via email, over the phone. Make class an inviting place to be. Convey positivity, optimism, and confidence. Again, goes back to emotional presence. Help them to know that they're welcome in class. And we can do that certainly in the About Us forum right away. And I find sometimes I'll tell students, I love to teach this course, and I hope you enjoy class as much as I enjoy teaching it. If students write about themselves, sometimes I'll say, I'm amazed by all you do as a parent, spouse, nurse, and student. If I sense a student lacks confidence in what they write, I try to encourage them right then and there. And if I find out a student is expecting in the About Us forum, I'll let them know to reach out to me if they need flexible deadlines or anything. Let them know you're optimistic and confident that with the appropriate level of effort, they can learn and succeed. And students really appreciate kudos. Via announcements, all of the grading rubrics, comments, and assignment, and encouraging messages throughout the session. Be a cheerleader, coach, and mentor. And you yourself commit to continuous improvement. Even right now, you're taking the time to invest in yourself by attending this webinar. You are investing in yourself so that you can be a better teacher who creates a social and emotional presence in your classes. Now, I've moved through the topics really quickly because we only have a half hour, and I wanted to leave plenty of time for questions for you to share your ideas for what's worked for you so that we can benefit from your experience. So I'm going to quickly move to the end of the slide. Here's my email address for questions, comments, and also I know there's probably some questions, and I'd love to hear your comments And here are my references. And again, thank you for attending the presentation. I will stop sharing now. We can talk.
Thank you, Marguerite. These are some terrific strategies that you've shared, and really, I really appreciate your thoughtfulness behind them as well, right? So the impact that they have and why we should consider doing these types of things as well. I don't see specific questions, but I did unmute or allow you to unmute yourself. If you would like to take your mic, you can talk to Marguerite, or you can type in the chat. There is a comment from Pam about what you just shared, that so students for her do a VoiceThread introduction and they use it later for a presentation. This is good practice in scaffolding, and they do love VoiceThread for the social and cognitive presence it adds to the online course. So that's just an experience from someone who's used VoiceThread as well.
Right, and I love to share my passion in VoiceThread. And you know what I found a couple of sessions ago, because our students were in the middle of the pandemic in New York, several of them did VoiceThreads on real relevant topics to them. In my healthcare policy class, they did the need for personal protective equipment for online healthcare workers, because they had to create a legislative platform. They were very passionate about this because they were living this pandemic. They were getting exposed because there wasn't enough PPE for them early on in the pandemic. Others did the need for mental health for workers who are on the front lines. So, so students were able to select the issue that was and the passion. I mean, there were a couple of times where you could burst into tears listening to what the students were saying. It was so poignant, and that learning has to be relevant to them and meaningful to them.
Yes, absolutely. I imagine you've heard some very interesting stories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Does anybody have any idea, things they'd like to share that they do that I didn't cover? Because I'm doing a lot of the things that I currently do from learning from other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what has worked for you? What has worked for your students? And Marguerite, can you remind me what the course was that you teach again?
I teach sometimes the intro to the online environment for the RN to BSN program. I also teach epidemiology and healthcare policy, and I have taught healthcare ethics in the past too.
Great.
I have a question, if it's okay.
Thanks,
Sure.
Maureen.
So I noticed that through the semester, a lot of my students might have started out being, enthusiastic, and they kind of shut down. And I had one or two that sort of disappeared, and you could tell they had other things going on. And I was just wondering, how do you balance how much we need to reach out as teachers and, trying to connect these students with an already overwhelmed health office? We're a small college. So I'm just wondering, are there strategies that maybe can help the students sort of bring them back?
Well, I think that's a real balancing act. And I found that with having COVID positive students. They tell you they're COVID positive and they, in a sense, disappear. Also, I think students, unless they communicate with us, we don't know what's going on in their lives. So all we can do is reach out to them. And a lot of times I'll say, I see, you haven't been in class or you haven't done this. I'm really concerned about you. Is everything okay? If you use, I don't know what your academic advisement model is, but we thankfully are very blessed. We have a centralized academic advisement model. So we have academic advisors for our students. So as soon as I detect a problem, I'll reach out to that academic advisor and ask them if they've heard from the student. And if the student stays missing for a while, then the advisor may call the student. And we could just, you know, and we've also through the pandemic, we've done some backdating of dropping students, especially ones that got very, very sick from COVID-19. So I think some of those things, you know, first place, reaching out to the student and let the student know that you care and that you noticed, you know, there are times too where if a student responds and I think that that student is really on emotional overload, I might suggest to them, you know, have you been speaking to someone? Because we're concerned about our students' mental health right now. And if they're working in a hospital, I might suggest to them, do you have an EAP? Is there a counselor that you can get using your employee assistance program? Or I know there's, you know, everybody has different resources on campus, but to try to tap into those resources for that student, because we're very concerned about our students' mental health. They are under tremendous amounts of stress right now.
I agree. Thanks. I like the idea of reaching out to their advisor. I hadn't thought about that.
Yes.
So I think
Oh,
that's a great step there.
Our advisors are wonderful, because the advisor also has a longer term relationship with that student than the instructor. I may have never had that student before, but the advisor's been there right from the very beginning. So that relationship's already built, and I capitalize on that relationship.
Thank you.
That's terrific. And I think that may have answered the question in the chat about sharing best ways to handle absent students.
Mm-hmm.
You may have other thoughts on that, but are you always successful in reaching them?
No. Last session, I had a student actually in my epidemiology class who was struggling right from the very beginning. And she just said, and she shared some reasons, but then by about week 4, she just disappeared. And she did fail the course and she'll have to retake it. That's rare. The other thing that we have done is not only flexing deadlines. I mean, in spring, when I was teaching spring session, imagine these nurses, they're students, they may be moms or dads, they're working and they're getting exposed and they're being asked to work overtime, and it was crazy for them. So this is no lie, there were times I had 6 different assignments being submitted in 2 classes at the same time because we flexed deadlines so much. The other thing I did was offer incompletes. I found too, what was really helpful is if I did connect with a student, some of them were telling me, I am so overwhelmed, I cannot think. And that sometimes is where, you know, you're constantly doing a balancing act between helping them to organize. So I was the one sometimes that was coming up with the plan, and I'd say, is this reasonable? Or, you know, they've just worked 3 12-hour shifts in a row, watched a bunch of people die in the ICU, and they'll say to me, I cannot post. I'll say, that's fine. You know, post next week, it's okay. And giving them that permission, and I'd say, just spend the weekend relaxing, decompressing, and charging your battery. They appreciated that so much because you're conveying caring to those students. And we're still doing a lot of that. And I imagine it's only going to continue as, you know, the numbers in New York or wherever you teach. I mean, the numbers are increasing all over the country. I'm in Ohio, and we keep breaking records every day for COVID positive patients.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in the interest of time, this has been some great discussion, and I really appreciate that. I'm going to just pull up the closing slide and let Lynn-Ann go ahead and wrap us up.
I would like to do that. This has been just so phenomenal. So phenomenal. So thank you so much, Marguerite, for all of your very timely suggestions. We'd like to remind everyone that our presentation recordings and slides are going to be available at the bit.ly website on your screen. There's also a survey. We'd appreciate if you would take the time to complete and return. Thank you again so much for participating, and Marguerite for presenting. And there are several additional webinars happening this week. We hope we see you there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care. Bye. Be safe.